Okay. Antichrist at war today. We put all the players out on the table, and tonight we're going to be seeing how it plays out. We're going to put them all into motion. Back to presentation one, just really briefly as a recap for somebody that's just joining in here for the first time or online. We have Babylon comes into Israel and Jerusalem from the north. Then Medo-Persia comes in from the north. Then the Greek Empire comes in the north. It splits four ways, but Daniel really only cares about two. Seleucid Greek Empire to the north, Ptolemy to the south. They fight back and forth, and Jerusalem and God's people get caught in the middle. To this day, Jerusalem and God's people are still caught in the middle. Roman Empire comes in from the north. Then the Roman Empire splits multiple ways, and again, he only cares about two, a king of the north and a king of the south. And you have papal-led Christianity coming in from the north, but first Islam came in from the south, then in the Crusades, Christianity struck back. And that has been going on through three conflicts: Arab Islam, Ottoman Islam, and the time of the end with the radical Islam that we are facing in today's world. People ask, is the God of Islam and the God of Christianity the same? And the answer is, not clearly a yes or a no. Because Jesus said that his true followers would love their enemies and do good to those who persecute them. So let's just go back to the Crusades for a moment. Was it the jihadists or the Crusaders that loved their enemies and did good to the other side? Neither one. Here's the answer. There are many Christians and many Muslims who are worshiping the same false god of force, fear, and anger. Do it our way or else. And that even included Christian on Christians in the Inquisition, etc. But there are also some Christians and some Muslims who have found or are in search of the same true God of love, truth, peace, and forgiveness. And in what we're going to look at today, we're going to find that God pulls a group out of Islam and a group out of Christianity that will unite in following Jesus as their Lord and Savior and the Bible as their authority. And that is already beginning to happen. Another proof that we're getting really close to the end of things here. Remember? No political party saves you, only Jesus saves you. No politician saves you, only Jesus saves you. No church or culture saves you, only Jesus saves you. God's people do get caught in the middle, and as I've said before, if you're not getting hit from both sides, you're probably in the wrong place. I am an equal opportunity offender. I tend to step on toes of anybody who leans hard right or hard left. But that's okay, I get the other side too, so don't worry about it. There's a lot of bad news in our world, but it all points to the good news. Jesus is coming again. And Jesus didn't give us permission to hate anybody. We're supposed to love everybody. So here's the catch. If you've got a polarized world that hates each other and you love both sides, which side's likely to love you? Now you're going to get caught in the middle. If you followed Jesus' teachings today, you are guaranteed to get caught in the middle in this world. But there will be some people on both sides that see something in that they like. The majority might hate you, but not everyone will. Now, some definitions you need to understand for the night. Number one, we have a papacy. It's ruled by a pope who claims global political and religious power, called church and state. You have a caliphate. It's a Muslim ruled by a caliph who claims global political and religious power. It's church and state, or if you want, church and mosque combination. King of the north, king of the south. One hit from the south, the other hit from the north on Jerusalem. They still both want Jerusalem. Islamists are the radical Muslims who want to bring about a caliphate by force. And they want to establish this global capital of Islam in a city they call Al-Quds, but the rest of the world calls it Jerusalem. If all the radical Muslims on this planet want Jerusalem as their capital. Is there any chance that Daniel could be wrong in saying Jerusalem gets caught in the middle? I mean, we're so far into this prophecy. I mean, when I first started, it kind of took some faith to believe it. And now it's kind of like, duh, yeah, it's happening. The radicals include the Muslim Brotherhood that originates in Egypt in the 1920s. And out of them comes Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Erdogan of Turkey, Iran, and others. And yes, even though Iran is Shia, it still has ties back into the Muslim Brotherhood, the ideas. The moderate Muslims are those who are opposed to a caliphate by force in Jerusalem or Al-Quds. These have included Saudi Arabia and those who have signed the Abrahamic Accords, United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Bahrain, Morocco, and Oman. So let's get into what's going on right now. As I said, we've talked about all the pieces. Now let's see how they go into motion. Daniel 11:40-43 explains the time we are living right now. Do you want to look at a couple of verses that explain where you are at the moment? Daniel 11:40-43. That's where we live. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. So the king of the south hits first and their allies. Radical left, Marxist socialism, unites with Islam in pushing against traditional Christianity in the U.S. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, which is Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand. Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. That's western Jordan. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. I want you to notice, at the beginning of Daniel 11, it names Persia, Greece, etc. At the end of it, it names names again. And the names are working in today's world as well. Question is, could it happen? Used to be the question. Now it's beginning, could it not happen? Muhammad Badia, the Muslim Brotherhood's supreme guide, their top religious guy, confirmed the necessity for every Muslim to strive to save Al-Quds, that's Jerusalem, from the hand of the rapist, that's Israel, and to cleanse Palestine from the clutches of the occupation, deeming this an individual duty for all Muslims. So if this is the spiritual guide for the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the foundation of all radical Islam in recent time, there's not much hope that something's not going to break loose, right? I'll ask a preacher. Siam, this is up at the Temple Mount, the mosque up there on the Temple Mount, Alaska Mosque. Siam can be seen telling the enthusiastic crowd that 3 prophecies would soon be fulfilled, that the rightly guided caliphate will be established, that Jerusalem will be liberated and established as its capital, and that Islam would achieve world domination. That's what you're looking at as the goal of Islam. Now, there are some that point to the prophecies of Mary. Book Thunder of Justice came up with a bunch of these. And in there, she talks about, supposedly, I say supposedly, most of these prophecies were supposed to happen at the year 2000, and they didn't, according to the book. I mean, according to the book, they were supposed to happen, but they didn't, because we've lived past that time. But interesting statements about a Muslim Antichrist. And many evangelicals since have also taught the same thing, that the Antichrist will be Muslim. Waleed Shoebat, Joel Richardson, Tim LaHaye, Joel Roosenberg, and others have all talked about that. However, they didn't rise from Rome. And that's where it should have been coming from, according to the prophecy. Now, what we're going to find is that Islam and its allies will attack the papacy and its allies. And the papacy and its allies, including the U.S., will counterattack and enter Israel, and Islam will be divided 3 ways. Those 3 ways are: one part escapes Edom, Moab, and Ammon. We're going to close with that because it's the good news. The bad news points towards good news. So I'm going to end with that one tonight. Number 2, Egypt and many countries will be overthrown. Well, remember, Israel, there is a land, but there's also a people. Egypt, this is all very consistent. For Egypt, there is a land, but there's also a people. The people is the radical Islam that comes from there in the 1920s during the time of the end. You have radical Islam all over the world. And then you have those who follow after, Libya and Ethiopia. These are those that are basically saying, hey, don't kill us. We don't like radical Islam either. And in case you don't know it, there have been more moderate Muslims killed by radical Islam than Christians have been killed by radical Islam. And at this moment, there is a fight to the death between radical Islam and moderate Islam in many parts of the Muslim world. If you just want to find out something interesting, go to Saudi Arabia and track year by year the number of executions that have been going on in Saudi Arabia. They're killing radical Muslims in recent years. A few years after 9/11, they decided that, the radicals weren't just after the U.S., they were actually after the House of Saud, them as well. So if you look at ancient boundaries, you have Egypt up in the northeastern corner of Africa. Still about the same. Libya was all northern Africa, and Ethiopia was this whole area down here. And if you look at that, what you can expect is that in some way these areas are going to join together with follow papal-led Christianity, the Abrahamic Accords. Several of them have already joined the Abrahamic Accords, and some of the people in here have already joined the Abrahamic Accords. It appears to be breaking, like the prophecy said. But again, there's a people all over the world as well. So how might all this happen? Well, in the last presentation, we talked about Revelation 11, how out of the French Revolution you get Marxist socialism that ends up being supportive of radical Islam in the time of the end conflict. In Revelation 13, we find that the United States, the Christian political right, comes into play and throws military power behind traditional Christianity, and they're going to be taking over as such and create a church-state union. Well, let's take a look at some things. In 2011, my first book came out. In it, the history was easy. But when you go past the history and start talking about the future, you're now going on a limb when you say what you believe is going to happen. Hindsight's 20/20, but the future, that's a whole nother story. But I had this conviction that if I didn't change the rules of interpretation, and because it's never missed a detail in the past, that I should be able to come fairly close to the basics of what to expect. And those basics were 1 through 6. That radical Islam was going to anger the Pope, and the Pope would call for war against radical Islam because in the Crusades and the Ottomans, it was always the Pope that called for war before the scene spoken of in the prophecy that happened. So I figured, okay, the Pope's going to call for war again. The U.S. and its allies would be the military enforcer. That's Revelation 13. Radical Islam would be overthrown. Moderate Islam would follow papal-led Christianity, and some Muslims would follow Jesus in the Bible. 2011, that was future. In 2014, in sequence, those things began to happen. In 2020, I realized that I'd made a mistake. In the appendix of the book, I said communism out of the French Revolution was a temporary replacement for Islam. But as modern radical Islam grows, it's probably going to fade away. And then it dawned on me in the text, it didn't say that. That was an assumption. Assumptions can bite you. It actually says it moves into the third woe. It didn't say partway into it. And that it is an ally, what I studied with you on Revelation 11. And when I realized that, we had to publish a new book. This one with parallels in left-right politics. And in 2020, we said radical Islam will join with radical Islam for a King of the South alliance. We already had the King of the North alliance up here. I don't know why I didn't realize they were the same thing. Just one's for the North and one's for the South. But, you know, how many times have you gone, oh, why didn't I ever see that before? The problem it is, now that's happening too. Let me take you through the whirlwind as it's developed. We're going to start in 2014. And in date order, you'll see how it's unfolded. Now, I can only tell you I added new slides to it today, which means I had to drop some slides out or you're going to be here a long time. And so over the years, I've just boiled it down to the very least I can have to explain this. In July 1, 2014, the reports come out that the Islamic State, a caliphate, has been formed. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed leader, the caliph of the Islamic State, the caliphate, stretching across Iraq and Syria, has vowed to lead the conquest of Rome as he called on Muslims to immigrate to his new land to fight under its banner around the globe. I didn't realize that when you had the first functioning caliphate after the Turks, on day one, they're going to say they're after Rome, the king of the north. That's pretty well self-explanatory. I just didn't know it'd be that clear. And then the rest of the world. That part I was kind of expecting. But I didn't expect they'd so openly, brazenly say they're after Rome. But they did. So the next question is, how long would it take the Pope to call for war? 5.5 weeks is all it took for the man of peace to call for war. August 7, 2014. Pope Francis appealed to world leaders on Thursday to help end the crisis in northern Iraq after a sweeping advance by radical Islamic State militants forced thousands of residents of Iraq's biggest Christian town to flee their homes. His Holiness addressed an urgent appeal to the international community to take action to end the humanitarian tragedy now underway. He called for military action. Now, it's true that some of the media said, oh, come on, he's not after military action, he's after humanitarian action. And within the next couple of days, he sent out several ambassadors, including to the UN, that said, nope, he wanted military action. The very next day, the President of the United States says America is coming to help. The Pope calls, radical Islam angers the Pope calls for war, and the U.S. is the enforcer. Man, that was fast. Within 36 hours of the papal call for action, the United States struck the Islamic State the first time. I am now convinced, based on Daniel 11, we're in the third conflict. I couldn't say we were there with 9/11 and all those things because the Pope had not called for war. But this time he did. Trump was now running for office right after that. He said the point is they want to do serious harm, radical Islam. We have to take them out. We have to take them out very, very swiftly and viciously if necessary. We've got to destroy the brand of jihad. And he intended to do it. And he doubled the number of bombs and missiles hitting them as soon as he took office. During his inauguration, he said, we will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. And according to Daniel 11, Egypt and many others are overthrown, those that are with them. Radical Islam gets overthrown. So I know that's going to happen sometime. Hasn't happened yet. Trump actually claimed he won that one. No, he didn't. They're still there. But it looks like he wants a second chance at it, right? Soleimani, this is just a couple of days after President Trump had recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Soleimani, commander of the Al-Quds force, says his nation is ready to support Palestinian forces in the Gaza Strip, days after the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And in case you didn't know it, this is the foundation of all the trouble you're watching in Gaza right now. Right there it is. It was announced right there. You see, most of you didn't know Al-Quds is Jerusalem. You notice this article, you have Al-Quds and Jerusalem in the same sentence, and it doesn't even let you know they're one and the same place. That's how the media can lie to you in front of your face. Oh, we didn't lie to you. We said Al-Quds, we talked about, you never said it's the same, and people don't know the truth. The other thing is, Soleimani is commander of the Al-Quds force. That's the Jerusalem force. The Iranian military, their special forces, are the Al-Quds Jerusalem force. They're training to take over Jerusalem, to make it their caliphate capital. Now, the Iranians are Shiite Muslims. The Palestinians are Sunni Muslims. They haven't liked each other very well over the centuries. However, all of a sudden, when Trump says he's recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the Shiites are suddenly very anxious to give weapons and money and training to the Sunnis. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they started building up Hamas and Hezbollah and other groups. Hezbollah leans toward Shiism. Most of those are Shiite, but Hamas is not. Here's a picture of Soleimani. It's an Iranian propaganda picture. Soleimani's the guy with the radio. He's calling in a strike on the White House. Claims to have hundreds and hundreds of terror cells in the United States ready to go when they're called. Well, you see the bomb blowing up on the roof and the U.S. flag is falling. Over here it would say, "We will crush the USA under our feet." Donald Trump lived in the White House at this moment in time. Lives up on the second story. Take a look at his window. They got him. That's the message of the picture. Do you get a little idea why a week or two ago Trump said, if I'm assassinated by the Iranians, I've already given the directions that they're to be obliterated? But by the way, how would you like to be Soleimani after this picture? We'll come back to that. Then the Pope heads off to the Middle East. The Atlantic says, the meaning of the Pope's historic visit to the United Arab Emirates. What has changed in brief is the dual rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic State. The following analysis applies equally to the Emirates and to Saudi Arabia. The Pope goes into the Emirates. They sign agreements because they both have the same enemy, radical Islam, from the Muslim Brotherhood. And right afterwards, the Emirates are the first one to sign the Abrahamic Accords with Trump and Israel. Interesting how that works out. Then in 2019, at the end of the year, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed. The caliph was killed by an American strike. They named a new caliph. He got killed. He was the professor. I forget the current guy's name. There are no press releases from him. He's not seen in any video anywhere. But I did see a little blurb the other day that U.S. Special Forces are getting closer to pinpointing where he is. So even Haydn's not working too well. But then Soleimani. the second most powerful man in all of Iran, the commander of the Al-Quds force, was killed by order of Donald Trump. And Iran was furious. But you see, Soleimani's days were numbered in another way. Just 3 or 4 days before, the U.S. embassy in Baghdad was attacked. And inside the embassy walls, they breached the walls, but they didn't get into the embassy itself. Inside those walls and on the embassy, they had painted Soleimani sent us. And Trump says that's the last thing he's going to do. And he was blown up on January 3. Iran was furious. And they said that they were going to strike American forces directly from Iran. And Trump said, you better not. You just need to know something. If you kill one American, you just need to know there are 53 missiles already dialed in with their targets. Kind of what he told them a week or two ago about if they killed him. And he said, you need to know that those missile targets, that 53 of them, that's one for each hostage during the Jimmy Carter years that they held. And he said, those targets include military targets, no surprise there. Cultural targets, there's a bit of a surprise. And religious targets, that's a big surprise. Because all American targeting has gone out of its way to avoid taking out religious and cultural targets. And Trump just now announced that if you kill one American, I'm dropping the normal target list and I'm going straight after your cultural and religious targets. In other words, you guys have been following holy war rules. Now I'm going to too, if you kill one American. And the Iranians decided to attack American bases in Iraq and Syria. And they sent a whole stream of missiles into American bases. And they hit the bases. There were 50 to 100 Americans that were so close to bombs blowing up that they ended up with concussions. But no one died. How do you administer 50 to 100 concussions by bomb blast and kill nobody? I can answer that question in a moment. But when they hit those bases, Drudge Report is just a news aggregate site that you can go there and it'll give you news headlines from all over the world. At that moment, I actually, just before walking out to present a presentation to a group of pastors, I looked online, boom, and I cut and pasted this in and went and showed it. Because at that moment, they were announcing world press, the U.S. and Iran have gone to war. They knew what Trump said, and they knew American bases were getting hit. But there was no war. No Americans died. Trump held fire. Revelation 7 says it this way. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth or on the sea or on the tree. Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. In other words, until God's people are ready, God's going to hold things back. What we watched happen in early 2020 is God called a timeout. My people aren't ready. What does a coach do if his team is disorganized and not ready? Calls a timeout. I didn't realize quite how clean of a timeout this was going to be. COVID hits. The threat of radical Islam disappeared in your news feed, but not really in the world. During COVID, they were rebuilding and growing back after their attacks from Trump. And during that time, the political left really joins in with them. Now, I want to show you something. God said his people weren't ready, but Satan's people must not have been quite ready either, because during COVID, you have a consolidation of the King of the South Alliance. Both the radical left and radical Islam hate Israel. Democrats splinter over Israel as the young, diverse left rages at Biden. Centrist Democrats were supporting Israel. Leftists were supporting Palestinians. So I'm not talking about a Democrat thing. I'm talking radical left goes one way, And a good chunk of the Democrats, the moderate left, you could say, goes another way. Well, let's see. Radical Islam and moderate Islam separate according to Daniel. Same thing's happening with their allies. Both the radical left and radical Islam hate capitalism. During COVID, thousands of Americans became socialist. Both radical left and radical Islam hate papal-led Christianity. Crisis Magazine, conservative Catholic magazine, said this: "Not since the Cold War we experienced such violent political, cultural, and spiritual unrest. Not since the Civil War has our country been divided so bitterly against itself. Our civilization is under attack from the far left within and radical Islam without." Yep. Both the radical left and radical Islam hate American exceptionalism. You go to street demonstrations. One says death to America, the other says down with America. Well, the radicals said death to America, the radical Muslims, but the radical left said down with America. Except in the last, since the fall of 2023, the radical left has joined with radical Islam, including in the United States, saying death to America. They hate and like the same kind of politicians. For illustration, they both were celebrating when Trump left office. And that's what I'm talking about on how clean this was. You get COVID and everything, and Trump is taken out, time out. 4 years later, Trump comes back, time on. And it's full blast. Now, I was calling this a timeout before Trump was ever officially running again, although I don't think he ever stopped. But when Soleimani was killed, the radical left and radical Islam all over the world were furious that he was killed. The moderate left and moderate Muslims were quietly happy he was gone. I mean, Daniel's three-way split, radical Islam, moderate Islam, and then those that are following God, it's full on now. Both the radical left and radical Islam like social justice. Boy, that just got upended. But there was this big exception, LGBTQ exception. Because, friends, what did radical Islam do to a homosexual? They killed him. Which often baffled me why you would have queers for Palestine, queers for Hamas, stuff like that, people in demonstrations. If you went to Gaza and celebrated what you believe sexually, they would kill you. But here's the bottom line. Both radical left and radical Islam believe that Jesus is just a good man, but not God. And the Bible is just a book, not your authority for life. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And when you look at it, radical Islam persecuting Christians in 47 countries. Marxist socialism in 11. All others combined only come up to 4. I'd say radical Islam, radical left are the ones that are the enemies of traditional Christianity, the King of the North. They grew in the power. 1990, Ronald Reagan and John Paul attacked the Soviet Union. It collapsed. But then they ended up uniting with radical Islam in the last push. And that's where we are today. And if you haven't noticed, Trump and his Christian right that are supporting him are death on both radical Islam and the radical left. How could God predict it any clearer for the moment that we're living in? The next thing up is radical Islam and the radical left to fall, unless God calls another time out. And I'm not God, so I don't know if he's going to or not. But it got a lot worse after the last time out. I'm hoping there's not another one, because it's going to get even crazier if there is. In September of 2023, giving unheard of assent to Saudi nuclearization, Israel girds for a Cold War with Iran. Remember, this is 3 weeks before the Hamas attacks Israel. All right? American officials still think of Iran as ultimately rational and able to be deterred. A regime full of sound and fury, but ultimately devoted to its own survival and stability, and thus loath to engage in conflicts it cannot be sure to win. The Israelis think of Iran rather differently. It is a revolutionary regime willing to destroy nations. And about 3 weeks later, Hamas attacks Israel with the help of Iran. It was Israel's 9/11. 2,000 plus killed, 251 hostages. As this was happening, at that time they thought it was 600 dead, 2,000 plus wounded, but it ends up, it was still going up when I made that slide. The Israeli response was called Mighty Vengeance. The name of that military operation of Hamas, what did the Muslims call it? Al-Aqsa Deluge. Anybody know where that Al-Aqsa Mosque is? It's on top of the Temple Mount. In other words, it's all about Jerusalem. Before October 7 was even over, while Israelis are still being killed, New York socialists are announcing a rally in support of the Palestinians the next day. Boom! The radical left all over the world unites with radical Islam. Just like that. Across the Middle East, a surge of support for Palestinians as war erupts. Russia and China refuse to condemn Hamas atrocity. A Hamas leader said, "We will repeat October 7 again and again. Nobody should blame us on October 7, October 10, October 1 million. Everything we do is justified. They can do no wrong." When you're in a holy war, you act like the devil in the name of God, and you believe everything you do is okay. The problem is, when you act like the devil, you're not of God. Israeli war alliances, take a look closely at them. Hamas, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, radical left. Well, let's see, that's radical Islam and radical left. Marxist socialism. Israel's side, US and NATO, traditional Christianity. One's king in the north, one's king in the south. But there's another war going on. Ukraine. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria. Ukraine, US, NATO, Israel, traditional. Hey, did you notice they're about the same? That's why some people believe World War III has already begun. I'm with them on that. It's not one war. It's one war, not two different wars. Just different aspects of the same war. Back in April 2024, Israel blows up another commander of the Al-Quds force with his whole staff. They are furious. And they say they're going to attack Israel. So they send 300 plus missiles and drones after Israel. But there's no damage. Get the irony of this. There is one person wounded, a Bedouin boy, Muslim. Why didn't those missiles do more damage? Because as they're coming up out of Iran, the Saudis and the Jordanians are shooting down the missiles from Iran. Radical Muslims, caliphate believers, non-caliphate believers, and the non-caliphate Muslims are shooting down caliphate missiles. Behind them, the British and the US are shooting down missiles, and then Israel cleans up what gets through with their Iron Dome. But get this, in October 23 and August of 24, the U.S. sent carrier groups ready to go into Israel if Israel needed help. carriers, the Air Force, but with them come expeditionary forces ready to go on shore, the Marines. It says the King of the North enters Israel, and the United States is a key component of the King of the North alliance. I'm just here to tell you, we've come close a couple times already. Whole Christian communities have been wiped out in Nigeria. Oh, every year, 3,000 or 4,000 Christians are killed out there. And I've been up in northeastern Nigeria, and I've got friends up there that I've trained on Daniel 11. Authorities search for answers as France's classic churches keep burning down. The church burnings highlight the tensions brewing in France, and its immigration policies have come under increased scrutiny. Oh, ever heard of immigration policies being a flashpoint in elections? Like here? 2/3 of religious building fires, however, are caused by arson. He stated that in France, one mosque is built every 15 days, while one Christian building is destroyed at about the same pace, most of those by arson. An official with France's Ministry of Interior stated that there were nearly 1,000 anti-Christian hate crimes in 2023. How often do you hear this stuff? Is there any wonder that young Frenchmen and young French women are rapidly turning towards the political right? Then in September, October, man, Israel just decimated Hamas and Hezbollah. I mean, just one major thing after another. They took out all the Hezbollah leadership. They took it out 3 tiers down, took out everybody. Then Trump was elected, and he notified Hamas that they better start letting loose hostages, or there's hell to pay. Well, they didn't let them all loose, but they've started. And when they decided to call it off last Saturday, a couple of days ago, they were reminded what was going to happen if they didn't, and they decided to keep releasing them. And here's an interesting one. The intellectuals are suddenly finding God. It is swinging from Marxist secularism over towards Christianity. I mean, everywhere I look, it's all across Europe, it's across the United States, and your young people are swinging back towards a Christian viewpoint on things and towards the political right. I mean, it's a massive swing going on right now in the world. And Trump since he came in the office very rapidly, Trump is flooding the zone, has so-called resistance running in circles. Have you seen very much effective resistance against Trump in the last 3 weeks or so? They're getting hit so fast they don't know which way it's coming from. King of the South Alliance has troubles. Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, and the Houthis, they're all in trouble. Actually, Syria was an ally of Iran and Russia. It no longer is, because the government was toppled very rapidly. It's still radical Muslims, but they're radical Muslims affiliated with Erdogan in Turkey. While the one government was falling and before the other one could take control, Israel took advantage of the situation because the whole Syrian Navy was in port. They kind of docked the Navy and everybody ran because nobody wanted to be there when the other side takes over, right? And the Air Force was basically parked. Israel said, we can wipe out the whole Navy and Air Force. They got the whole Navy and most of the Air Force in one day. And they only killed 16 people in the process. They were trying to take out as much military hardware with as few lives lost as possible. It hardly even made the news. That's how fast things have been happening in recent time. Because what would have been a huge news story at one time, it just doesn't make it. Canada, France, Germany, Austria. They are all left-leaning governments that are in trouble now because the right is coming back. This is not just a United States thing with Trump. And as I mentioned in the last presentation, in Germany, the German leadership is furious with Trump, but the people on the street are wishing they had a leader like Trump there because they want to go right, because of immigration issues and not being able to speak issues. Except I don't trust the right to give you freedom of speech that lasts either. Power corrupts. Absolute power absolutely corrupts. We're getting fairly close in time now. A fight to the death is underway. Some people regard my title as hyperbole. It is not. Trump, I believe, understands he's in a fight to the death. The American establishment tried to discredit him and ruin him, to imprison him, to assassinate him. And he goes on to say, anybody that joins his administration had better understand that if they're not successful, they will be destroyed when they leave their position. If both sides know this is a fight to the death, it's going to get brutal. And basically, that's what you have in Daniel 11, because the king of the south goes down and it doesn't come back. By the way, I'm not endorsing this. I'm just saying what is. There's a lot of stuff in this article and a lot of articles I don't agree with. I'm just showing you what is. Hungary's president predicts that Trump tornado, Daniel talks about a whirlwind. Trump tornado will bring peace in Europe and reinsert Russia in the international community. It might. Why? Because the radical left and radical Islam are going down, but some of the left and some of Islam are going to swing over and join papal-led traditional Christianity in the U.S. Russia just might swing over too. I can't tell you who's going to end up on whose side for sure, but I'm telling you to watch out. Radicals going down, moderates swinging. Okay? The United States has initiated a change that puts the whole Western world system, that upends the whole thing's not there. Somehow I lost part of it. But it upends the whole Western world's standing. Just take a look. Yesterday, in France, the major leaders of Europe, what are we going to do? Revelation 17, those 10 horns come together for a short time. There's a rearrangement right at the end. I think we might be watching it. Time will tell. We'll see if God calls a timeout or not. I'm just here to tell you, I've never seen it get this close yet. I've been watching it closer and then stop, closer and stop, and all of a sudden it's going, moving. Oh, there's the rest of it. Let's read it right. The United States has initiated a change that puts the whole Western world's system of arguments and value system and way of thinking on a new track, he said. Yeah. Egypt. Violation of the peace deal, Israel's U.S. envoy warns. Egypt is reinforcing Sinai bases. Egyptian army spokesman, we are preparing our army in case Israel does not listen to our wise advice not to occupy Philadelphia corridor. Do it our way or else. I will just tell you, in Daniel 11, Egypt is overthrown. People have been telling me for a long time, Tim, no, Egypt is a friend of the U.S. and Israel. They're not going to do it. And I said, go to the streets of Egypt. They're Muslim Brotherhood on the streets. El-Sisi is just collecting weapons and stuff from the U.S. He doesn't like the U.S. Just keep your eye on it. I've never seen prophecy fail, so my guess is Egypt radicalizes and goes down. And there are hints of it happening. European leaders gathered in Paris Monday for emergency talks on how to react to the U.S. diplomatic blitz on Ukraine, which has thrown a once solid alliance into turmoil and left the Europeans questioning the reliability of their key transatlantic partner. Everything is changing. Oh, speaking of changing, Pope Francis, sensing he is close to death, moves to protect his legacy. They've already influenced European politics. They have no problem influencing the conclave, said one close observer of Vatican politics, referring to Trump administration. Revelation 11, it is the beast with lamb-like horns that sets up the image to the beast. I have seen many conservative Catholics hoping Trump will interfere in the papal system to make it go more conservative again. And if you've been thinking clearly, some of you have been wondering, but what about this Pope? Doesn't he lean left? He does. But all of a sudden, as this happens, he might be gone. So let's take a look again at the text. At the time of the end, the king of the south, radical left and radical Islam, attacked the king of the north, and the king of the north comes against him like a whirlwind. I'm just suggesting, I think you're watching it. Radicals are overthrown, moderates follow king of the north alliance, and some follow Jesus. So what happens when you're desperate? You're under time pressure and you tend to overreach, and their overreaching has caused a backlash that can set up their overthrow. But that leads to what's called loud cry in Revelation. Daniel calls it tidings from the east and tidings from the north, the greatest evangelistic opportunity of all time. Let's just say there was an evangelistic revival when the French Revolution falls. That's a radical left fall. When the Muslims fell with the fall of Turk, there was a revival all over the world. When the Soviet Union falls here, there was a 2-year revival across Central Europe. Let's see, if every time the radical left or radical Islam falls, there's a revival, what do you think is going to happen in a global sense when they both go down together? In case you haven't been talking to Muslims, they're asking this question: if Islam is a religion of peace, why so much bloodshed everywhere it is? And because they're not allowed to ask questions out loud, they're all thinking of this. But if radical Islam goes down, boy, are we going to have a fantastic opportunity. Because all over the 1040 window, which has been ruled by radical left, Marxist, socialist, and Islam, primarily, not completely, but primarily, all of a sudden, you are going to have a wide open door. I was recently in Pakistan teaching pastors there, and if they baptize a Muslim, they and the Muslim will both be killed. It kind of hinders evangelism to Muslims. Okay, at least open. But these guys, now that they understand Daniel 11, they are preparing for what they think might happen very quickly, because it's happening quickly here, that the radical Islam will go down, and all of a sudden they're going to have an open door to reach those people that are asking questions that couldn't ask them out loud but suddenly can. And you're going to have a massive people movement coming to Jesus. It's going to be fun. So what am I watching for? I'm watching for Egypt to radicalize, and I'm seeing hints of it. Global Islamist attacks, yep. What happened in Japan as they started losing World War II? They started using a new weapon called a kamikaze. When a government or an ideal is in collapse mode, it goes desperate mode. Expect it. FBI director issued chilling warning about possible terror attack on U.S. soil similar to Russian concert hall massacre, which left 144 people dead. We are increasingly concerned. Interestingly, just recently, New Orleans, terrorist attack. And the radical left was actually celebrating it in favor of Palestine. King of the North allies in Israel. Keep your eyes out for United States, NATO kind of forces entering Israel. They're already there somewhat. The THAAD system has about 100 American soldiers in Israel operating it now, boots on the ground. But it says, and he, the king of the north, shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. So right at the end of it, they not only come into the land of Israel, but they set themselves up in or near Jerusalem. Well, about a week ago, Trump said some things that upended the Middle East. a little over a week ago. He says, we're going to take the Palestinians out of Gaza. We'll seize the land. The Pentagon will help enforce it if necessary. We'll own it. Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, actually said, yeah, and then we can put the temple up on the Temple Mount again. Okay. The only people talking about that kind of crazy stuff were prophecy people. And all of a sudden on the international news aggregate, it's headline news. I'm just telling you, go to sleep, wake up, and the world's changed. What seemed ridiculous doesn't seem so ridiculous anymore, does it? Again, we got forces sitting off the shore. So which is more dangerous to you, Islam or Christianity? For you, probably papal-led Christianity, because that's the culture you come from, and you'll go with the largest group of it if you're not paying attention. Which is more dangerous, the left or the right? The side you lean towards is more dangerous. Because you will not be deceived by the ones you don't like. You know their downfall, their evil points. You and your friends talk about it all the time. But you will be deceived by your side because you already have a habit of covering up the sins of your side. So you need to, each one of you, identify your political leanings and be on guard against your side. And then realize, don't ever let that stop you from loving people on the other side. Because if it stops you from loving somebody on the other side, you are no longer following Jesus, you're following somebody else. Let's go to the good news side. The people who escape, those are those delivered by Christ. These shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. They escape. In 12:1, we have the same Hebrew word now translated as delivered, but it's the same word. So these people who escape are at least some of them the same as these that are delivered, and these are those that are saved by Jesus to go into his kingdom. That means there's a group of Muslims that end up in God's kingdom. All right? Revelation 17:8. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life when they see the beast. Interesting thing. Radical Islam goes down. Moderate Islam follows the king of the north. And all the world follows the beast, except for those in the Lamb's book of life. Edom, Moab, and Ammon don't follow. They escape. They have to be in the Lamb's book of life. We've got a remnant out of Islam that trust in Jesus and the Bible is their authority. Thessalonians said, and they shall not escape, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. The only people that escape are those that are trusting in Jesus. Amos 9, on that day will raise up the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and repair its damages, and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the Gentiles who are called by my name. Whoa, Edom is going to be a part of the Davidic kingdom, ruled by Jesus. Let's take a look at a map. There's Edom, Moab, and Ammon. If you look at the Davidic kingdom, Edom, Moab, and Ammon were a part of it. They were inside the boundaries of David's kingdom. If Jesus restores the Davidic kingdom, it would include Edom, Moab, and Ammon. And in Daniel 11, Edom, Moab, and Ammon escape. Also, I want you to notice something. Here you have Israel, and here you have Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Side by side, right? Remember, you have a land and a people? The land is side by side. And in the geopolitics, that's the most friendly, stable border Israel's had for 30, 40 years, ever since the 1967 war. All right? But God's Israel of faith, the people all over the world that are trusting in Jesus, and then you have a group of Muslims that also trust in Jesus, come in side by side. The land and the people plays together all the time in Daniel 11. Edom, Moab, and Ammon are all Abrahamic family relatives. So you get those that are really following God from Abraham's family that join in with God's Israel. Joel 2. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. So just before Jesus comes back, you're going to have people getting dreams and visions. And by the hundreds of thousands, we have Muslims having dreams and visions. I have a friend. I will not say his name or where he lives because there are death threats on him all the time. But he runs a website. If you had a vision about the man in white, you go to his website. And Muslims all over the world go to this website because they keep having this vision of Isa, the guy in white, Jesus, the righteous one. And he tells them that they should follow him for their forgiveness of their sins, and they should follow his book. And they go there, and he starts dialoguing with them. And he says, did he say something like, and he gives them a statement, yeah, and something like, yeah. Then he tells them, oh, by the way, I'm just sharing parts of the Bible, his book. The Bible? But they already realize this is the same message that they've been getting in their dreams and visions. Got to be careful what I say. We have this happening all over the world right now. Muslims are coming to Christ faster than ever before. It appears that time is moving. It's not so much time out, it seems to be accelerating now. It could still have a time out, but I'm not sure. There's an interesting Muslim teaching. The Jews were divided into 71 sects, one of which is in paradise and 70 are in the fire. The Christians were divided into 72 sects, 71 of which are in the fire and one in paradise. My ummah, Islam, will be divided into 73 sects, one of which will be in paradise and 72 will be in the fire. What is that saying? There's just going to be a few Jews that make it into heaven. Most of them are lost. There are going to be a few Christians that are going to make it into heaven, but most of them are lost. There's going to be a few Muslims who make it into heaven, but most of them are lost. That actually matches scriptural teachings. There's some from each one of them. And there's enough stuff in the Quran that matches Scripture that those who are understanding it are learning how to build the bridge for a massive people movement out of Islam to follow Jesus as Lord and Savior. Now, let me tell you, you need to be careful what you call yourself when you're talking to a Muslim. When I walk into a mosque, and I've done it many times, unannounced, just walk in, just before or after Friday prayers, their high point of the week. And when I walk in, I ask to talk to mosque leadership. And I do not call myself a Christian. Very specific reason that I don't call myself a Christian. And it's not because I'm afraid of being a Christian. If I was afraid, I wouldn't walk into the mosque. I'd go somewhere else. I will tell you, my stomach is usually in butterflies as I walk in. But when I walk in, I do not say I'm a Christian because to a Muslim that means a follower of the Pope, a crusader. I am not. So I call myself something else. Now, if Jesus is showing up talking to Muslims and calling himself the man in white and his book, I figure that's a pretty good thing to follow. And so I just say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus and a true person of the book, the Bible. You see, in the Quran, there are true people of the book that are to be respected. And then I say, and I can honestly say this one, I don't eat pork, I don't drink alcohol, and I believe the whole book, not half of it. You see, Muslims are ticked off at Christians because if they say, if Christians say they believe the Bible, why do they only follow half of it? And I said, and I believe the whole book, not half of it. And they look at me and say, who are you? I said, I told you, I'm a follower of Jesus and a person of the book. And then we have a dialogue. And I tell them, hey, everything's happening. We got the third and final conflict going on now. Radical Islam's going down. Modern Islam is following papal-led Christianity. And I said, hey, whatever you do, don't follow the Pope. They look at me, huh? Because remember, they're thinking Christian and follower of the Pope, and this isn't computing. And I said, but there are going to be some Muslims and some Christians that follow Jesus and the Bible. I'm going to tell you just a short story. I was walking into a hotel late one night in Southern California. It's about midnight, and I'm sleepy. I've done a presentation and then driven. I just want to go to bed. Ever been there? Walk in, and if I don't miss my guess, the guy sitting behind the desk is a Muslim. I'm wearing a shirt just like this that says Islam and Christianity Prophecy Seminars. Who knows? It could have been this one. I got a bunch of them. And he's staring a hole in my chest as I'm talking to him about my room. I'm usually looking for opportunities to talk to people, including Muslims, but right now, I want to go to bed. I said, Lord, how about not right now? Can I just go to bed? And he didn't ask me anything. He gave me the room keys. I left. We got in our room. There are no towels or washcloths in our room. I said, Karen, don't worry about it. We can get them in the morning. She says, I want one now. Okay. I walk over to the office and I said, sorry, but there's no washcloths or towels in our room. Oh, I am so sorry. And he gets me this huge stack of them, about twice the normal, whatever. I mean, I'm getting payback with interest. He's looking right at my shirt. He said, sir, I probably shouldn't ask, but what does that mean? Okay, Lord, you got me. I went through the little thing about 3 conflicts. He said, I'm a Muslim. Yeah. He said, but I've got to have something to teach my children. If Islam is a religion of peace, why so much bloodshed? But then I looked at Christianity, and I don't like what I see there either. And I said, you know what? God agrees with you. I said, it says the majority of both are lost, but only some from both follow Jesus and the Bible. I said, if I give you a book, will you read it? He said, yes, I will. I've got to have something to teach my children. I gave him a book. I was there for 2 or 3 nights, and by the time I left, he was almost done. I touch base with him every night. He's just a late night clerk. So, yeah, so much for sleep, right? But folks, we are looking at such an interesting situation. What should a true Christian do in this conflict? You're going to have to make some decisions. I know I don't want to be part of the king of the north or the king of the south. And I will tell you, I totally respect people who serve in our military. At the same time, if I was in their shoes, I'd be struggling being a political pawn in a religious war. Pray for those folks. They've got a really tough situation. I think it's time to be praying for our leaders. You know, between the last 2 leaders, everybody's had practice praying for somebody they don't like. And we're not supposed to be praying that they die. We're supposed to be praying that God changes their life. Do you know Nebuchadnezzar was really a mean dude? I mean, Daniel and his friends, they were all made eunuchs. They were killing the people in the cities, the leaders, and all that kind of stuff. They weren't friendly. Daniel prayed for Nebuchadnezzar. And do you know Nebuchadnezzar was actually converted and became a follower of the true God? How do I know that? Read Daniel chapter 4, written by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He wrote a chapter of your Bible. Pray for our leaders. I'm sure glad I'm not in their shoes. Doesn't mean they're ever going to be converted. But why not have the Holy Spirit digging in so at least they have a chance? But yeah, we're going to get caught in the middle just like the land is caught in the middle. Between the political left and the political right, between Islam and Christianity. It's amazing how many ways that is. Closing with this thought. Now it's high time to awake out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. I've never seen it this close before. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. It's time to be ready. What happens next? That's what we pick up in the next presentation. Tidings from the East and the mark of the beast. We're just working our way through Daniel. In 44-45, there's still some pieces we haven't picked up. What comes right after the fall of the King of the South Alliance? It's that wonderful opportunity to share the gospel, but there's also an attack against God's people from the King of the North. And we're going to look at Daniel 11 and Revelation 13 a little closer again. And you're going to be amazed again at what is there. Tidings from the East and the mark of the beast is our next presentation. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, again, I thank you for your word. And Lord, I just thank you for giving us this prophetic word so that we don't have to live discouraged and despondent and all the craziness. And Lord, I ask that you would take what I've shared here, and I ask that your Spirit will direct it into each heart and mind in just the way it needs to be applied to keep each one of us away from the deceptions that Satan wants to take us down with, and to direct us towards your truth that is always stable and always sure. Thank you for Jesus and for loving us. In Jesus' name I thank you. Amen.